It wasn't launched to seize territory, crush an enemy flag, or even win a battle. It was launched to pull living souls from the jaws of a dying empire. In the spring of 1945, as Soviet artillery hammered Berlin into rubble, one German general received an order that made no tactical sense. And what happened next would become the strangest, most desperate offensive of the entire war. But before we trace this final gamble, this operation fought not for victory but for escape. Let's talk about why understanding last-ditch decisions changes how we see all of history. On April 16, 1945, the Red Army unleashed its final hammer blow aimed at Hitler's bunker. For 72 hours, the fighting turned the landscape into something from a nightmare. The Soviets absorbed staggering losses, entire battalions vanishing in fields of artillery fire, but they kept grinding forward. They smashed through the last significant German defensive line on the Seelow Heights, just east of the capital. What remained of the German forces either collapsed back into Berlin streets or found themselves slowly strangled in isolated pockets. One of those pockets was the 9th Army, trapped and bleeding out. Here's where the logic bends into something almost surreal. Adolf Hitler, instead of fleeing south to the mountains, decided Berlin would be his stage. He took personal command of the city's defense from his underground bunker, staring at maps while the world collapsed above him. What could possibly reverse an encirclement that involved over 1 million Soviet troops? Hitler's gaze fell on the 12th Army. It was still sitting west of Berlin, originally positioned to block any American advance from the Elbe River. The Führer issued a command: ignore the Americans entirely, they wouldn't push further anyway, and smash through the Soviets to reach the trapped 9th Army. Then, together, both armies would rescue Berlin and save the regime. Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel, head of the German armed forces, drove to 12th Army headquarters in Alt-Holdensleben to deliver this vision in person. At midnight on April 22nd, Keitel got straight to the point. What would you say if your commander asked you to charge into a ring of steel? Liberate Berlin, Keitel declared. Turn your forces. Link up with the 9th Army. Get the Führer out. Wenck, you're the only one who can save Germany. But Keitel had chosen the wrong man for blind obedience. Wenck nodded, said everything Keitel wanted to hear, and waited until the field marshal's car disappeared down the road. Then he pulled his chief of staff, Colonel Gunther Reichhelm, aside for a real conversation. The relief of Berlin is hopeless, Wenck admitted. The 12th Army simply didn't have the strength. But here's what we'll actually do. Wenck traced his finger across the situation map. We'll drive as close to Berlin as we physically can. But we will not abandon our positions on the Elbe. With our flanks anchored on the river, we keep a corridor open, a channel to the west. The plan wasn't to save Hitler. It was to save whoever could run. Charging straight toward Berlin would only get us encircled by the Russians, Wenck continued. Instead, we'll try to link up with the 9th Army. Then we pull out every soldier and civilian who can reach the western lines. Part of this operation focused on Potsdam, where 20,000 German troops were still holding out despite being surrounded. Wenck ordered a thin screen left facing the Americans, who remained largely static, while every remaining mobile unit held itself at the still disorganized Soviet flanks. If the 12th Army could grab Potsdam, it might still punch a hole toward Berlin and create that western escape route. Simultaneously, the trapped 9th Army would try to blast its way out of its own pocket and join the retreat. The main thrust toward Potsdam fell to the 20th Corps, commanded by Cavalry General Karl Erich Kohler. For what would become the final German offensive of World War II in Europe, Kohler deployed 3 newly formed infantry divisions. What does an army look like when it's already died twice before? On the left flank advanced the Ulrich von Hutt 10 Infantry Division. Formed at Wittenberg on March 30th from the staffs of 2 destroyed divisions, the 56th Infantry and 18th Panzer Grenadier. Its regiments came from another broken formation, the 190th Infantry Division. Its armored support consisted of about a dozen Hetzer tank destroyers, plus a few experimental 88mm Waffenträger vehicles and 8-wheeled armored cars. Command fell to Lieutenant General Gerhard Engel, a veteran who still wore his Knight's Cross with oak leaves. In the center came the Scharnhorst Infantry Division. This unit was even stranger, roughly 80 officer cadets, trainee non-commissioned officers, soldiers about to begin leadership courses, former Luftwaffe ground crew, and combat-hardened survivors from the shattered 167th and 340th Infantry Divisions. They had a handful of Hetzers, a few Stu-G assault guns, and some mobile anti-aircraft cannons. Leading them was Lieutenant General Heinrich Gotz, another Knight's Cross holder. The right flank belonged to the Theodor Korner Infantry Division. Formed on April 4, 1945, at the Dobritz training area, it drew from survivors of the 215th Infantry Division and roughly 7,500 personnel from the Reich Labor Service, a Nazi paramilitary organization whose members had already received basic military training. The division also included officer cadets from Dobritz, convalescents, and soldiers on leave who couldn't reach their original units. Command went to Lieutenant General Bruno Frankowitz. The assault would receive ample artillery support. Wenck had discovered supply barges packed with ammunition, food, and fuel stranded in his sector. But how these cobbled-together formations would perform against battle-hardened Red Army troops was anyone's guess. Could scraps of broken divisions truly punch through Stalin's elite mechanized corps? The offensive kicked off on April 24th. The Theodor Korner Division, supported by what remained of the 243rd Assault Gun Brigade, launched northeast out of the Niemek area. A heavy artillery barrage preceded the attack. Because every road leading west was clogged with terrified refugees, the largely infantry assault moved cross-country. The Theodor Korner struck elements of the Soviet 5th Guards Mechanized Corps, units that did not expect such a fierce, almost fanatical charge. The Germans reached the outskirts of Traian-Brietzen, 21 miles southwest of Potsdam. Furious fighting erupted around the town. The Germans briefly recaptured it before being pushed back. Then came April 25th, and the most spectacular phase of the entire operation. The Scharnhorst Division launched its assault near Belzig, and here, for a few hours, they fought like it was 1941 again. They caught the Soviet 6th Guards Mechanized Corps on an exposed flank and punched straight into the rear areas. They captured entire Red Army support units, tank repair depots, supply convoys, even field kitchens still cooking. Panic spread through Soviet lines. The Scharnhorst pushed an astonishing 11 miles into enemy positions. By late afternoon, the division's reconnaissance elements reached the health resort at Bad Belzig, only 15 miles from Berlin itself. They ejected the occupying Soviet troops and discovered something unexpected. The resort had been converted into a massive field hospital containing over 3,000 wounded German soldiers and hundreds of evacuated sick children from Berlin. For 3 days, Soviet troops had occupied the resort. They had looted it. They had assaulted female staff members. What would you do if you found your own wounded children behind enemy lines? The Scharnhorst Division secured the area and began planning to evacuate everyone west, 50 miles to the Elbe River at Barbie. Another ferocious battle erupted around Belzig as the Soviets rushed in reinforcements to first stop, then crush, the German attack. On the left flank, the Ulrich von Hutt 10 Division advanced northeast of Belzig toward Potsdam, pushing the Soviets back several miles. But German attacks could go no further. Heavy Soviet air support began pounding all 3 divisions. Massed Soviet tanks broke the semi-encirclement of Traian-Brietzen that the Theodor Korner had achieved. Although the German 20th Corps held its positions for several more days, the sheer weight of Soviet numbers made breakthrough impossible. Potsdam remained out of reach. Berlin might as well have been on the moon. Meanwhile, the trapped 9th Army tried to fight its way toward the 12th Army, a story that deserves its own telling in another video. On April 28, 1945, 2 days before Hitler would take his own life in the Berlin bunker, General Wenck abandoned the operation. He reported to German High Command that his entire army was being forced back. No further attack toward Berlin was possible. What do you do when your last gamble fails and the noose keeps tightening? The remnants of the 12th Army retreated through the Halb forest and trudged west toward the Elbe River. They wanted to surrender to the Americans rather than fall into Soviet hands. They didn't charge to win a war, they charged to outrun extinction. The last German offensive wasn't about conquest. It was about a door closing forever. If you find these forgotten corners of history as haunting as I do, hit that like button and subscribe to War Real History, because the past isn't dead. It's just waiting for someone to ask the right questions.